you really want to get a job that sponsors your visa. If a company comes forward and offers you less than what you would have expected to receive as an annual salary, what do you do? Do you say no to that offer just because you think you should be earning more? Or would you rather take it and...
Speak a bit about the industry you're in, the nature of your job.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I work as a senior power systems consultant. We're helping renewable companies connect new generation to the grid. So it's a consultancy, and our activities are quite wide and also deep. All the technical issues that arise when new generators, these new renewable generators, solar panels, wind farms, they're trying to connect to the grid. There are so many issues. Those issues are what we try to solve for clients. We also try to solve those problems for the grid operators and also for the governments, the Ofgem as well.
Okay. The size of the company you currently work for, you mentioned, I think you hinted that was a small company. What kind of size are we talking about?
Small is relative, but my company is about 85. So compared to some other companies, it's really a very, very small company. But again, compared to some, maybe a startup, it could be seen as large. So yeah, 85, around 85 and 90.
Okay. So, give us a bit of backstory. How did you end up finding or landing this job?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that the company I'm working for, I've never heard the name of the company before I applied to the company. And this is probably something for people to take away. It's very easy for us to focus on the familiar names and the familiar companies, and you want to apply to GE, you want to apply to Siemens, you want to apply to National Grid and the likes. I'm mentioning companies around my space. You could do a Google search, which was what I did. So I've been applying to jobs, and on this very day, I decided to do a Google search because I've always wanted to work as a consultant. So I opened my browser, I did a Google search, and I said, list of power consulting companies in the UK. And it came up with a list. Of course, on that list would be the normal popular power consulting companies, but also was the company I'm now working for. And I saw the name. What name is this? I've never heard or seen this. And I just went to their website and checked their careers page, and I saw that they were accepting CVs for a particular role I saw that I was interested in. I sent the CV to them, and a week later, I got an email from the HR saying, "Would you like to? Do you have time to interview?" And that was the rest is history. So I had the first. Maybe I'll just say a bit about the process. For my company, it was really straightforward. About a week later, like I said, I had a 30-minute call with the person who hired me, that the hiring manager and the HR person. And after that first 30-minute call, they invited me to come to the office, I think 2 weeks after that. And I went to the office, I did the interview, and a few days after, I was given the job. So it went very quickly from putting on the Google search. I think everything took maybe about a month or less from putting in that Google search to being offered a job. That was the story.
That's very impressive because, as I'm sure is a lot of people's experience, getting feedback from an employer that you've applied to for the first time, especially for a company that you've probably never heard of before, to hear back from them after a week. I mean, in general, people find a struggle to hear back from employers, period. And then sometimes when you hear back from them, after a decent amount of time. So to hear back from them within a week, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I guess Martin, I was just going to say that, you asked the first question about the size of the company. So I guess that's an advantage of smaller companies, right? A large company has thousands and tens of thousands of people applying to them every day. So they can't just keep up with replying every single applicant. But a small company, I'm not even saying the small companies will reply you if they don't like you, but at least if they are willing to consider, it's possible they're looking for that to fill that vacancy at the time. So the with smaller companies, you can have things moving really, really fast compared to the larger companies. So that's something I wanted to add to that.
No, good point. And just out of curiosity, did you send applications to some of those well-known companies, and did you hear back from any of them?
It's an interesting one. Anybody who's applied for jobs would know. I think the story is it's going to be very common across board. Of course, I did. Of course, I applied to very many jobs. The last time I checked, I tried to, because I had a folder where I kept I kept a record of all the jobs I applied to. I think I would have applied to maybe up to 60 or 70 jobs before I finally got this job. And again, some people would even say, oh, you applied to just 70. Oh, you're lucky because we've applied 100, 200.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did apply to very many of them. Many of them, of course, you hear back from some of them. For some of them, you don't even hear back. There are even ones that I remember a story where I was applying to a job that I liked. I found it online. I was so that was during my PhD. So I was in my PhD office late at night, I think around 9 p.m. I started, or 8 p.m. I started that application. And the application was a long one, the ones that have like multiple pages. You need to write a short essay here, a short essay there. And I did all that. And I think I submitted finally around 10:30 p.m. or 11 p.m. I left the office. I got back home. Oh, no, nothing happened that night, but I went to bed and I woke up in the morning, I think around 5 or something. I opened my phone. The first thing I saw on my phone was that they sent me a rejection for that job, saying they didn't want to take me. And I'm wondering who was that someone there waiting for me to send in the application so that they can reject it. So yeah, I've had the rejections come in so many different forms. I remember a similar story, not a rejection story though, but I did apply for a job, and after I submitted, when you submit a job, they send you a confirmation and say thank you for applying for the position of this. So I did apply for a job. One of these ones you see quickly and just send a CV and that. I did that, and they sent me a confirmation and say, hey, Obinna, thank you for applying for the position of a director in JP Morgan. So I applied to JP Morgan as a director. So that shows I was making so many applications and I got things mixed up at some point and I applied for the position.
Yeah.
So it's just funny that way, but yeah, these things can happen.
That would have been a very good movie story if after submitting that director application at JP Morgan, you actually got a call for an interview. That would have worked out very well.
I would have got a call saying, "Don't you ever apply to this company again." They give me a life ban you for life from applying to their company.
That's an interesting one because the story of the number of applications people submit and how demoralizing it can get, especially like that example you gave, where it just seemed like you've committed time to fill out this application. Did anyone actually even look at any portion of the application? I get you have to use machines to go through and scan through stuff because you might not be able to see it, but there's a part of you that just wishes that somebody at least just even gives it 1 minute glance. So to go to bed having worked hard on it and then to wake up and it's the first thing you see, that must have been tough. Okay, so but what next with the company you applied to and got this job from? How did the conversation around sponsorship happen? Did you get the job with them, letting them know at the initial that actually you're only interested in this if you can be sponsored, or did that conversation come later?
No, that's a good question, Martin. When I checked this company out, look, sometimes when you're applying, there is a list, just for the sake of people who may not know, there is a list by the either Home Office, but there's a list of companies that have the sponsorship license or certificate to sponsor. So we used to use that list back then to, before you apply to a company, just check and see if that company is on that list. So I use that list, but at some point you just throw applications, you shoot your shots, like they say, and see what happens. So I wasn't sure at the time I applied if my company was going to sponsor my visa. But that conversation definitely came up. I think, to be fair, sometimes when they see, like you see your name, your first name, Obinna, or your a surname, it makes sense. Even if you are the hiring manager, it makes sense to check with this applicant if they require visa sponsorship. So that's, I think they would have asked me that question. If they didn't ask me, I brought it up. So they asked me, do you require visa sponsorship? And I said, yes. And they said, okay, we do sponsor, but we can talk about that if you scale through the entire interview. So that came up from start. And I think that's the best thing to do because, well, it's going to come up anyways, but better to have that conversation at the start rather than when everyone is wasting their time and you then realize you can't, or they can't sponsor you. Yeah, so we started that conversation out from the start. If I just extend the story a little bit, when I then finished on the main interview, after the phone interview, on the main interview day, that conversation came up again. It was a bit of a back and forth, but I'll summarize it by saying that my company were willing for me to, they didn't sponsor me immediately, but they said they would sponsor me, but that I should start, since I could get it's called a doctoral extension scheme visa at the time. I don't know what it's called now. So since I could get that visa, I was actually close to getting that visa. So they asked me to get that visa and then start with them. And along the line, before that visa is for a year. So they said along the line, before the year runs out, they were going to sponsor my own visa. So that was the agreement, which they kept to, because in the end, within that 1 year, they did sponsor me. So, but it's a conversation that has to happen when you're trying to, when you're negotiating for everything.
That's a good one. And that doctoral visa that you just mentioned now actually prompts me to think a bit further, but maybe we'll cover that as part of a separate conversation, because I think there's an opportunity there to let people, particularly those that are getting close to finishing a PhD, get them to know some of the alternative options available to them if a skilled worker visa is not immediately available, or if that's not even the route they want to take straight away. But we can talk about that later. The application process for the skilled worker visa, getting it, and now working for them under that skilled worker visa. Was there anything about it that you want to share? Did it feel you had to perform because you were almost here under the condition that they're giving you that skilled worker visa, and it's not something that was guaranteed for any amount of time?
That's a good question. I will start by saying, if you're any serious-minded person, if you go to a new organization, it has to be somewhere on your priority list that you want to impress. You want to give a good first impression. You want to convince, or you want to demonstrate to the guys who have employed you that they actually had made a good decision. And then if you are on a visa, then I think it's almost natural that, if you're looking forward to being sponsored, I think it comes almost naturally to really, really try to, do your best and make sure that there is even if they don't sponsor you in the end, it wouldn't be as a result of your non-performance or as a result of something that you're falling short of. So for me, personally, I wanted to do well and to create a good first impression to my managers, to people, to the other senior colleagues in the company. But the truth is, I think it's something worthy of pointing out now. When a company takes you in and says that they're going to sponsor you, but that you should start on your visa, maybe it's a graduate route visa or a doctoral visa, whichever it is, something that's temporary. Put yourself in the shoes of the employer. They're also checking you out. Really, sponsoring your visa is an investment on their part. You're not going to be paying for that. They're going to be paying everything. Many companies will pay, including your NHS fees, everything. So they are going to be checking you out. So just take it that you are on a probation of some sort, because unless they put it in black and white, which I doubt most companies will do, like put it on pen and paper and say, we are obliged to sponsor you after 6 months or 1 year. If you have that agreement, fine. But again, an employer could fire an employee. There's no obligation that stops them from firing you. Just take it that you are working, but you're also being checked out. You're also on some kind of probation, because if they find that you are really, let's say, you're not living up to expectation, there's no reason for them to go ahead with that financial commitment on your behalf. So yeah, so that it's not, nobody's going to tell you that you're under pressure, but you should know that if your future in terms of sponsorship depends on your performance while you're there.
Some good pointers there. One big topic I want to touch on, well, big in the sense that nobody wants to be working and being underpaid, but at the same time, you understand that in your position, you might not have as much leverage. So just on the topic of money and salary,
mm-hmm.
How did you get on with that conversation, particularly with the company that you were hoping would sponsor your skilled worker visa? Were you tempted to kind of compromise and just make sure that, look, just pay me what is allowed under the skilled worker visa and I can cope? Or did you go in there, being very clear that you wanted to ensure that anything on offer was for your worth? How did you approach that part?
Yeah, no, Martin, that's a very good question. I would say it should be considered on a case-by-case basis. So first of all, it's an optimization problem you're trying to solve. There are so many variables, and you want to know which one do you give the more weight, the heavier weight. You have to examine where you are. I'll give you an example. When I finished my PhD, I knew I didn't have so much going for me. I didn't have a lot going for me in terms of working experience, because I just spent 4 years in the university. I mean, if I was getting an academic job, maybe some things count. But if you're going into the industry, they still respect your PhD, but you have to be honest with yourself that you don't have a wealth of working experience in the industry you're going into. Now, so you have to check yourself. If you know that you do not have sufficient work experience that will justify the higher salary that you think you want to ask for, you might be cutting yourself short, because you don't have much experience and you're asking for these amounts. Why should they pay you? Why should they hire you?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there are people who also have experience, but when they go into these negotiations, Martin, like you said, they just want to optimize. They just want to get the visa and get getting the sponsorship. They just want to get the job, and then build from there. That's also fine. But if you have some work experience, I would say, try and see you have a strong case for negotiating and convincing them. Say, hey, actually, I have this number of years of experience doing this. I can bring this value. There's always that back and forth you can go. And one thing I must say is there is hardly any employer that's going to stop the recruitment process just because you've said this is how much I would like to be paid. No, they like you, they're interviewing you, they're going to say this is how much we can pay you. So you putting your offer forward doesn't just break the whole deal. You say this is what you would like to receive, and they'll say, well, we've looked at your CV or our circumstances or the position we're recruiting for. This is how much we can pay. So you guys can come to a middle point or some compromise. So in a nutshell, Martin, I think it should be considered on a case by case basis. Another example would be, let's say, you really want to get a job that sponsors your visa, and you've been on your graduate route visa, and you have 2 years on it, and you're like 1 year, 8 months, right? And your hands are really tied. You do not have much power to negotiate. If a company comes forward and offers you maybe less than what you would have expected to receive as an annual salary, what do you do? Do you say no to that offer just because you think you should be earning more, or would you rather take it and still be on your way and then plan things out from there? it depends on it to be on a case by case basis, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's no hard and fast rule, isn't it? There are things that you need to shift depending on the specifics of your situation. So no,
Yeah.
that was really good. Just in rounding up now and then, Obinna. So if I've just come into the UK, I've just finished maybe my master's or my PhD, I'm looking to get a job in your field with a company that would sponsor me. A couple of bullet points. What are some things you would tell me to just start from here? Don't miss these things. There are a few other things you might need to do, but just as a whole, this is what I suggest you start off with.
Yeah, that's another good question, Martin. So my field, I'm a power systems consultant. The overall field is electrical engineering. Now there are so many sub branches of electrical engineering, and even within power systems, there are so many other sub branches. If it's for my particular job role, it's power systems analysis. So that will require you to have some knowledge of modeling power systems using some power systems analysis software like IPSA, like Dick Silent Power Factory, like PSSE. Sometimes you might also be required to know how to write some scripts, like using Python to write some code. So if someone is within electrical engineering or power systems and wanting to get a job in this kind of area, if you're currently doing your studies or doing your master's or your PhD, my advice would be, well, I think I should give it as a general advice. Try to speak to people who are working in the area of field that you want to get a job in. You don't have to know them like your brother or your sister. No, you can go on LinkedIn and find people, even if they are random people, or if you go for events or seminars or webinars or career fairs, speak to people who are doing the thing that you would like to do and ask them, what softwares do you use in your industry today? Because sometimes the universities take a quite some time to catch up with what's happening in the industry. So ask them, which tools are you using? What skills should I pick up to be able to get me ready to get this job? And if you ask, they will tell you specifically what you should be getting. For some fields, there was someone, so you could, like, if you asked me, I'll tell you the specific softwares to just start using. And even though you're doing something similar in your university or during your studies or your PhD, being able to use a tool is very important. So if two people are applying for a role and one person, both of them understand the concept, the basic concept, but one person knows how to use the tool that we're using, the other person doesn't know how to use it. Why should I hire the person who doesn't know how to use it? So mentioning that you know how to use this tool is very, very important. So I would say, reach out, don't be an island, and don't assume this is what they are using. Ask someone in the industry and say, what skills do I need to pick up? And then you can start building those skills while you're doing your studies. And another thing I would add, Martin asked me about the skills or the tools to pick up. But another thing I'll add is also to be careful with, because you have to make out time. If learning these skills, or let's say you want to learn a programming language or you want to learn how to use a tool, if learning those things are not part of your study, it means that you have to make out extra time to pick up these skills. Now, it's also understandable for many people that any extra time they have outside of their study, they want to use it to work, to earn money. And that's all good and fine. But I think it's a very good advice to think about the future more than the present. I'm not saying don't do other jobs that you need to do to get by, but also create time to develop yourself and with respect to getting the job that you like to get. Because if you spend all your time doing other kinds of things, other kinds of jobs that do not guarantee or do not even help you to get to where you want to get to, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. So, make out time to get yourself ready for when you start looking for the job. And if you're out of university already, and you're working, same thing applies. You need to make time to pick up the skills that will move you forward. That's what I would say, Martin.
Okay. No, that's been very informative, Obinna. Thank you very much. It was good getting some insight into your story. Yeah.
Martin, it was nice. It was nice sharing my story on this platform for the first time.